All right. Coming up next in our panel discussion, we are going to be discussing the implications of growing use of virtual money and how it has entangled itself with consumer data. Our knowledgeable experts will shed light on the topic, the new virtual currency, why consumer data is more valuable than ever. Please welcome Marush Karni, AI and ML program lead at Adobe, on stage as this session's moderator, who will keep the discussion moving swiftly as our panelists will examine the importance of consumer data as they discuss blockchain technology, the new digital economy, security hurdles, privacy concerns, and ethical dilemmas. Also joining the panel will be Larry Olivarez Jr., co-founder of NCrowd App, Matt Kelley, sales consultant and advisor at Excess Ventures, and Kesha Lindbergdashwork Technologist and technology salesperson and DA for insurance companies. Please welcome them all to the stage for this next panel.
Awesome. So such an exciting session, and such a diverse panel. Um, the question is very current, right? Why consumer data is more valuable, and why don't we start with just introducing both of you, and then I'll go ahead. So why don't we start with that, Kesha?
First, thank you. Thank you so much for giving us some time on this subject. It is a subject that's really dear to my heart. I call myself a technologist that incorporates all my interests, but I have an engineering degree with a minor in math, an MBA. I have a couple of licenses where the DA in insurance is because I work catastrophes as a desk adjuster for insurance companies, so hurricanes and fires and such. And then I also have a license to sell insurance, life insurance. But what I do during my 9 to 5 is besides helping out with cybersecurity and talking to security officers to help with IT folks, is I sell technology, which are risk products to companies. I sell real world solutions under risk, under a cybersecurity company, and I am a salesperson. So I sell SaaS technology. And so data is super important to me in all of the aspects of things that I do. Okay. Here you are.
Awesome. Larry, you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Larry Olivarez Jr. I'm one of the co-founders of NCrowd. NCrowd is a digital networking app and platform for business professionals, and we kind of specialize in young professionals and college students as well. On our end, we're more of the business side of things. And so data from a business standpoint is obviously extremely important. And so one of the things that we've noticed kind of in our work is the importance of connectivity data. And in our platform with NCrowd, what we wanted to do was kind of take an old and antiquated system in terms of the exchange of business information, like an old school paper business card, a sign-in sheet, that type of stuff, and modernize it and virtualize it to where not only is geography not an issue, but there's more actionable things you can do with that information. For business and enterprise, the data is becoming, and I know we're going to talk about that, just extremely valuable in determining spend, in determining strategic partnerships. There's really no excuse anymore for not knowing about who you're doing business with, because if you do the work and you get down to the bottom of it, you can find out about the people you're working with or possibly considering collaborating with. So we're just proud to be here and really excited about the topic.
Awesome. Just quick introduction from my end. This is Mayuresh Kulkarni. I lead the program management team at Adobe for applied science and machine learning. And before that, I spent a decade with KPMG Management Consulting, focused in the financial services and insurance vertical. So I played a lot with AI/ML. I played a lot with data. I played a lot and spent a lot of my time front, middle office, back office, data transformation. And, data is core, as we all have seen, as we have experienced. And the benefits of it are always there, but there's also a lot of pain that we have with data, especially consumer data, right? So let's start with answering the question, which is the topic of this conversation. Why consumer data is most valuable? Why do you think it's valuable? What does it bring on the table?
Yes, data is valuable, mostly because it's transactional. And I'm going to say a shameless plug out there. I work for Archer and I sell risk products. If you need me, let me know. But one of the things that I saw recently, and I know a lot of you all follow politics as well as technology, is that TikTok was asked to a Senate hearing. At that Senate hearing, TikTok was asked if they shared their user data with the Chinese Communist Party. And the answer was no. Okay. And so when we talk about data, your information, whether you have plugged in and given a permission for a company to share your data, or if you have found out after the fact that there's been a data breach, or if a company has actually attained your data to sell it, data is valuable at this point, okay? It is transactional, whether, and we can get on this later, whether it's in the black market, whether it's on the exchange floor, or whether it is something that a private or a public company is using for leverage to have revenues. Okay.
Thank you. As I was talking with one of my colleagues and fellow co-founders last night, he brought up the point, and I think that it was spot on. It's your data is everything. I mean, it is the currency. It is going to be the future. Probably one of the most important pieces of how business is done is going to be based on that. If you look maybe 15 or 20 years ago at the top 10 or 15 companies in the world, they were more product and service driven. And if you fast forward that now, the top half of those companies are all data driven. Google, Apple, Facebook, obviously those are kind of the big ones. The key right now, though, on that is that it's still very, very early on in the ecosystem of how data is used. Not so much in how it's generated, because it's pretty simple. We just give our data away by living our life and doing everything through a mobile device that we carry with us every day. But the data is still being amassed, and it's being analyzed, and it's being worked, so to speak, as it pertains to an economic model that each corporation or enterprise needs to use, right? And so I think it's everything in terms of if you're trying to be a responsible steward of funds, whether it's shareholder money or private equity or whatever, why would you not harness and use data instead of just kind of shooting in the dark on strategic initiatives? And so if you and a lot of that, we are literally providing the roadmap to our wallet in everything that we do, right? And so right now, that's where I think one of the struggles is, or one of the concerns is that the way that data is taken, right now it's very one-sided. The people creating the content and creating this data don't have much say on what's done with their information once they put it out into the ether. And so that's something that I think, from a privacy standpoint, there's obvious privacy considerations that needs to be more refined. But from strictly a business standpoint, I don't know that there's anything more important. It trumps a product, it trumps a service. It's going to be the overlaying rationale to any initiative moving forward. But it's pretty evident that we're still in the very early stages of this. But those that can really master how to use it and analyze it and deploy that data, hopefully in a responsible way, I think they're going to be have a giant advantage on their competition.
No, I totally agree with both of you. The way I think of it is data is the new oil, right? It is oil in a way where the way you use it, it depends on you, right? The applications are just endless. And really what happens is we end up confining ourselves with data a lot of times. And then, really what we end up doing is we end up building use cases and then go and start hunting for data. And what you will see, some of the leading organizations, Facebook and Google, and what they do is they gather this data, and they basically find ways to channelize it, and it's more of a well, and then how can they use it, right? It's the other way around. So the question again goes back to like you come from insurance, right? The traditional organizations, how can they play in this space, and how can they really get an edge and use data as a differentiator?
That's a really good question. I'm going to kind of pose a couple of questions to the audience just to kind of gauge and survey, and then I'm going to give my response. And you can just show by your hands being raised. How many of you all's companies has an ebook or webinar that you offer on your website and transactionally ask for someone's data in order for them to access it? How many of you all have ever signed up for someone's ebook or company's ebook or their state of risk management, or have ever signed up for a webinar or event on someone's website?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. How many of you all have given the wrong info when you did that? Yeah. So, okay, the answer to your question is leverage of data. So, be that data is transactional, they're in sales, and I'm a salesperson of technology, that when we gain information that we would like to use for sales or marketing or promotions, we have a transaction of we will give you data to gain your data and hope that it's correct, right? Then you have companies that if your data is not correct, when you plug in your information to gain my company's data, then I will go to that company, which is charging me to access that data to find out if this company or this person or this lead has correct information, or if I can find the latest information, and there's multiple like LinkedIn Navigator, Zoom Info, 6sense. There's many companies that exist because they transactionally have data. Okay. And so that kind of answers the question, is that, I don't think that there's anything wrong or bad about that, but data is a currency and it's completely transactional.
But the follow-up question to that is, do you think firms or enterprises have data? They gather it, but they don't use it the way they should be?
Yeah, there's so many different uses of data. We have just began to formulate how to leverage data to speculate for companies, for sales, for marketing, exact targeting, for information from the data that we receive. There's many different uses that a company can use to leverage the data. And we are just now on the cusp of that. There's some companies right now I know out here, and some of you may be that company that is leveraging your sales on data. Okay. And so we've just begun. I would love to be on the forefront. So if anyone has any projects or anything with data and it has something to do with sales and promotions and marketing, I would love to be on the forefront, because I truly believe that this is on the forefront. And just to kind of have one more second, my father-in-law had a license that he sold and is still in use to LinkedIn at this time. And part that's not being used, but is part of the license that will expire soon, is that there was it was not blockchain, but it kind of works as a blockchain type of way, whereas the data is leveraged and corrected and secured, of course, but that it's checked for accuracy before data is given. And so it's not being used right now, but it is part of the license. And so at some point, I may try to take advantage of that,
So, on similar lines, but slightly different question, right? So she was in insurance, and, with respect to NCrowd, actually, you may want to just give a plug on what NCrowd does for folks who do not know. and then how you're using data for your benefit, and how you're getting that as a product differentiation.
Sure. So NCrowd is an app. You can go to the App Store and download NCrowd. We actually have the conference here up on the platform. So if you go to the app and you click on the Internet 2.0 conference, you can see those that are attending the conference, and you can connect with them and be able to archive that connection, have a shareable, actionable way to have the information. One of the things that was important about the initiative of NCrowd originally was to be able to just make connectivity on conferences and events like these be easier, and to also allow virtual networking to be done. So even if someone is not physically here, they can go on the RSVP list on NCrowd. They can see who else is attending. They can simply swipe on them and be able to make a connection. And the type of platform that we have doesn't end when the conference is over. So this is a type of platform where you can make connections here in Vegas, and then next week when you're at the grocery store back home and you see someone that says you have a business card with you and you don't, you can simply just make a connection on your phone with the QR and it stays archived. And getting back to the discussion on the data points of that, from a business standpoint, I think there's a couple things to piggyback on. One, it's pretty obvious that the use of data, the way it's kind of collected and analyzed, is still very clunky. And you can see that amongst many, many corporations and companies, they haven't figured that out yet. Some have really figured out and they have it dialed in very well, and they're using it amazingly well, and some are a little behind. I think another thing that's also important about this data trail that we all create every single day is a term called data exhaust. And it's something that all the extra stuff that quote unquote doesn't matter, about things that we may not find relevant to someone that may be wanting to use our data down the road, but it's still there. It's much like exhaust from an automobile engine. It's just stuff that gets created. One of the things that you hit on that I think is also extremely important in our industry when it comes to business and networking and business connectivity is erroneous data. I think it's a gigantic problem. One of our co-founders, Roland Martinez, has done a lot of interactions and meetings with Fortune 500 companies in terms of what are their pain points, in terms of those that utilize a CRM system a lot. And a gigantic problem is just wrong data, because even if they're looking at hiring a certain type of professional to come in and work for them, and they have old business card information, and then that person leaves and goes to another outfit, if the system doesn't automatically know how to update it, you have a great looking spreadsheet of data with a bunch of junk that is not relevant. So I think that, again, when you look at those types of challenges for business, erroneous data is a major problem. One of the technologies that we're working on at NCrowd is to be able to almost create a filtration system for the data to be able to keep the CRM information refreshed. And we think that that's a big initiative that we think we're kind of on the cutting edge on there, that we're pretty excited about. But the data is only as good as its accuracy. And so one of the things that we incorporated with NCrowd is making NCrowd be cloud-based. So if someone is on NCrowd and they have their profile set on our platform and then they change jobs, or let's say a young lady gets married and her last name changes, when she changes her profile on NCrowd or on LinkedIn, because we're cloud-based, it'll automatically change in the system for everybody else. So we've all got those emails around, hey, this is my new job, this is my new title, this is my new email, this is my new cell phone number, please save it. As the presenter before us was talking about, time is money. I mean, you're wasting time trying to track down information you need. In our business, we call it last mile networking, last mile connectivity. Making sure that the data you have is fresh and updated and accurate is a huge part of having something that you could actually utilize to benefit your business. So that's one of the things that we're, I think, combating. It doesn't get talked about a lot. Everybody talks about data and using it, but the accuracy of the data, I think, is just as important. And that's another initiative that we're trying to do, is help enterprises and businesses be able to filter and better have better accuracy on the data that they do use and kind of market and use in their day-to-day dealings.
I again 100% agree, and the reason, so I sit right in the middle where you know I do a lot of work with AI and ML, and as you said, right, accuracy of data is extremely important in that space. If you don't have, if you, the issue is a lot of data exists. However, if you give junk, what the model is going to predict or churn out from an AI, artificial intelligence or machine learning perspective is going to be junk. And how do you work through some of that filtration and classification of the data and make sure that you take things out of the terabytes or petabytes of data that you have, and how do you do it intelligently is really a pressing challenge. And how do you not just apply resources in terms of human labor, but also a lot of compute, because compute to do some of this work is also expensive, right? So it gets to the core of, it's not a one and done kind of a problem around data. It's something that you need to do it, and you need to continuously be at it. And you need to basically have a team who is totally dedicated on it. And what I have seen, and I don't know if you guys agree or disagree, is there are teams who take care of data, but that's not their entire day job, right? It's part of their job, and that creates a lot of problems. And the issue around it, they don't get the treatment. Data doesn't get the treatment that it deserves. So again, totally agree with you guys. And I don't know if you guys wanted to add anything in that regard.
Of course, I agree with both of you all. All of us have shopped for something, and then as you already are shopping or have bought, here comes all these ads for something you've already bought, and you're like, wow, I didn't need that ad because I've already bought the vacuum cleaner. But if it had predictive, or more purposeful information based on my purchasing data, information that I've plugged into the metaverse or internet, maybe they would know that I need like vacuum cleaning powder, and so they would sell me that ad instead of selling me the vacuum cleaner ad that I've already bought the vacuum cleaner. So I agree with you. There's places to go with where the data is located now, and onto where we are going to go with the data, and places that we can go that are just more better for consumers, better for, salespeople like myself who do use CRM tools and hunt for leads, consistently. I do have multiple streams of income, and I do work for insurance companies, and I do cybersecurity, but my 9-to-5 job is I'm a salesperson for Archer IRM, which is under RSA cybersecurity, and I sell risk products, and I'm constantly talking to those who have had breaches, who are ready to protect their data. And so, we have so many places to go with data, and I really applaud your company, because I really think already that it is a wonderful tool to have, And so, yeah, my day-to-day is sales, and I'm hunting for new information. And wouldn't it be great if AI did just automatically update everything? That'd be great.
I'll add something real quick. I think that that's another factor of the clunkiness and how early we are in the way we work with data. I think ultimately one of the, at least on our end from a business and connectivity standpoint, I think a lot of it is just being honest and transparent. I think generationally, I'm 45 years old, and when I started getting targeted on Google because I searched something and now I get ads on it, pardon me, no tech company asked me if that was okay. They just did it, and we just kind of got used to it. I think the younger generation, though, the millennials and the Gen Zs that are coming up, that are entering the workforce now, I think they're much more conscious of the data game. Understanding, I think there's just so more well-equipped to understand kind of the way this game is played. Ironically, I was having a conversation with a daughter of one of our colleagues at NCrowd, and I was complaining about the fact when I'm targeted when I Google something and I get ads. She had a totally different opinion of it. She likes it. And she said, you know, sometimes if I'm looking at something on Instagram, I will purposely like, or I'll click on it, or I'll kind of look on it a little bit longer because I don't have time to research that product now, but I know that they'll target me later. And that kind of surprised me. But I think ultimately, like for instance, we know that with NCrowd, what we're doing, because it generates and it has to do with who you work with, who you network with, who you possibly transact business with, where you work, who you collaborate with. It's a lot of really key information there that's exchanged. We think that it's really important to have almost a user's bill of rights when it comes to your data. And so on our, you know, on our website and our company information, we want them to know, because at least for us, again, we're business connectivity platform. We're not trying to poke anybody's eyes or pull one over on anybody. We're just trying to help people connect easier. But if for instance, like I'm a sports fan, and obviously sports right now is turned to analytics, like everything has. And so you can look up statistics, you can Google a batting average or how many touchdowns Tom Brady throws. But if I wanted to look up statistics on my colleague here on how many deals you've closed, how many networking events you've attended, how many connections you made at this conference, there's really no way to know that. Now, there is through NCrowd, but part of what I was saying is that there's a whole bunch of data that enterprises are going to start to create that doesn't even exist. I know that's one of the things that we've, you know, kind of happily stumbled upon, is that there's all the data that gets all the press and all the attention right now, but there is mountains and mountains and mountains of data that doesn't even exist yet, that is being created accidentally. And as these platforms continue to kind of proliferate and we use them on a daily basis, it's going to kind of naturally evolve. But I think if these companies are good stewards of the information, they're upfront about what their goals are and what their initiatives are, I think that's going to come back and provide the consumer a bit more confidence in sharing accurate data. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but when, you know, on most of these platforms that I ask to give my birth date, I don't give the actual birth date. A few days off, maybe a few years off. But because like I said, this seems to be so one-sided, I'm sharing everything about myself, sometimes accidentally. I think the other parts of those that are using and harnessing our data need to be, I think just they need to be held to a higher standard. And I think if that starts occurring, there's more accountability on what they're doing. I don't think there's any downside to that for anyone, the business side or the consumer side.
So I think you're touching, and it's a segue topic, but it's very related and it's important for this whole data conversation and data generally to be successful, which is, do we need more regulations in this space, right? Do we need, and you know, as enterprises, how should we adopt it? Should we work with it? Should we work with regulators? What are your thoughts around this topic?
Well, I did mention earlier the Senate hearing with TikTok and the ask of if their information was sold. And of course, it was a huge topic because no one gave them permission to sell our information to anyone. And so with that sense, there are already regulations in place. I am an advocate for free enterprise. And so I would go the side of less regulations, or we have regulations in place. And so it's super important for businesses to adhere to those regulations and not, you know, I know there's been a couple of cybersecurity breaches that were that people's data was on the black market, you know, and, you know, occasionally we'll find a business has done it themselves and sold personal information on the black market so that they could make money. And so I'm an advocate of free enterprise. So, you know, I would love for the companies to grow and for data to grow and this part of industry to have growth and innovation. And so with that being said, I would love to see what becomes of it, you know, and then see if there's any pitfalls in the way.
On the reg side, I don't really know where I fall on that right now. It's hard to say. I do think that it kind of reminds me of the way the internet started out in the early 90s. where it was literally the wild, wild west on the internet, and there were no safeguards, there were no privacy, there were no children's protections, there was all sorts of crazy stuff out there. So eventually, yes, I think that there will need to be some level of reasonable regulation around the data. I think that one of the concerns that I have is it appears that many of the mega cap gigantic tech companies always seem to be a little ahead of the curve versus our friends in Congress. You don't have to look very far from when, for instance, Mark Zuckerberg was interviewed in Congress and some of these other tech CEOs and executives were, and you look at the questions that were being asked from the congressman, you could tell there was and I'm being polite, a giant disconnect in understanding about the way tech works. And so I would say yes. I'm again, it's kind of open-ended. I think that there would be a good place for at least some standards, I think, that could be adhered to, but they're only going to be as effective as their enforceability. And then baking in plenty of flexibility to evolve, because we know that the stuff's going to move faster than the laws can catch up. And so I think, that's where I believe that, government and private business need to come together in an honest way and really, come up with a workable solution for that, to where there are some basic standards around data and transparency. I think it's inevitable. I don't know how effective it can be, at least at the outset. I agree with free enterprise and less regs, all for that. But I do think there need to be some responsible guardrails around that. And I think it's going to be one of those where you put things in place and then you tweak and you fine tune as you go along. I don't think any law or reg is going to get it right the first time. But as long as the spirit of the reg is something that's trying to add some standard and a little bit more transparency, I think it's a good start.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I'm just gonna bring it up because it is really high in the level of information right now. When we're talking about data, we're not always talking about personal data that was brought up earlier. But Elon Musk, took over Twitter, and then the Twitter files came up, and we found that there was a suppression of people and information. And, I'm a researcher, so sometimes I'm on YouTube looking for a video and can't find it, like what previously had happened in Twitter. Using Twitter as a real-time tool and YouTube as a past time tool in research. It's super important, I guess, on the flip side, to make sure that we're not going against anyone, but not too regulated to the point where you can't find information and information is suppressed because of a certain group saying that it's not needed to be accessible. So when I do my research, I love to say, what are the pros, what are the cons, and what's in the middle? And if everything is only the data is accessible, which is only one side, it's just kind of not research. So I just wanted to kind of mention that part too, because we did mention a lot about personal data, but research and information is also data. So
yeah, again, great point. And actually, I'll give you an example that comes to my mind is Disney, for example, right? The Mickey Mouse and the illustrations of Mickey Mouse are available online. That doesn't mean that, if we would go to Disney, and just because they're available in public domain doesn't mean Disney has given up the rights. They still own the rights for it. And the reason why it's applicable is if you see the craziness that's happening in the world of generative AI, which is, they're using billions and trillions of images that are available on the web, open source, and basically, using them to train models, which can then say, hey, generate an art like Picasso, or generate a Mickey Mouse on a beach. And yes, again, this is consumer data, but in this case, consumer is Disney, right? So it's their data, someone else is generating it, and now there is no transparency around like who owns the data and how did it come to life, and who is creating it. So going back to the question that we had earlier, I feel like we need regulation. Sometimes we go on extreme ends. We need to have that balance. And as you said, probably we're not going to get it right the first time. But we need to at least go down that path, and we need to course correct on the way, right? Um, I have one more question. So why do we think this is such a difficult problem, right? So if we go to top 100 CIOs and if we ask them like, hey, is data important? Everyone would say yes. Like it's the most important thing that they want to spend time on. But then there is a gap between strategy and then the execution. Why do we think that's happening?
Yeah, I always joke because there's a kind of disconnect because yes, if you ask any CEO, how important is data to your company? He said, oh my God, it's super important for our sales, for our promotions, and for our marketing. We want to be precise of who we're marketing to so we can spend the revenue dollars as needed, including advertising. And we would love to hit our numbers on sales. And so we need precise data to sell to those people who are precisely our persona for who we want to sell to, right? But then at the same time, a lot of people will transaction and download data at different companies and be interested in their ebooks or webinars or their events, sign up and use false data. And you're like, or I'm like, hey, you're not playing the game right because you're supposed to put in your correct data so we could follow up with you. And so that's, one of the places where that same CEO who's saying in his interview, yes, data is so important and I need precise information, may be the same person that will go to Archer IRM's website, which is the company I work for, and download one of our risk management or risk mitigation ebooks and put in false information. And then I have to use another software, like for software or Zoom Info or other, and do hunting to find out who this CIO is or CEO is. And so, that's the balance. And so, you can't, there could be safeguards put up, you don't get this information until you put your right information, but how do we know it's right? So it's kind of like a game, I love it. I chase down people and call them and they're like, how did you find out I'm at this new company? And I'm like, because I'm a great hunter. So yeah, I love data. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's going to grow. And I'm really happy to be a part of data being my interest. I have a few interests, as you all see. I'm a little bit all over the place, but I am specifically in my interests and my passions. So data is part of my passion. So
Thank you. I would add, I think there's a bunch of difficulties with it. Much too long for our panel today, but I'll tell, to me, one of the biggest ones that's hard to define. Data to me may be a different definition than it is to you. Then you divide it in a business context versus a social, personal context. It's just a gigantic monster, and it's kind of hard to corral. And then I think it's hard to overlook the privacy concerns, and then there's the type of data that I'm actively putting out there if I'm filling out some sort of information. And then there's the data that I'm actually putting out there. If I'm Googling flights or trips that's coming up. And I mean, so I think it's extremely hard to define and put in containers. And then how to police those containers. And I'm not smart enough to have the answers on how to do it, but I think like anything else, again, I kind of liken it to what occurred with the internet in the early 90s. I think it's just going to hopefully evolve over time, and there's innovative, smart people like the ones here at the conference that are eventually going to be helping to solve those problems, because it is a challenge. I mean, it just is. And I think at the same time, there's huge opportunities to make gigantic positive impacts, help the planet, sustainable, responsible ways that it can be used to help, be more productive, help with our time. Was one of the topics earlier, guest, that I thought was really interesting. I think there's a lot of opportunities, but I think we're on the kind of the early stages of a whole new gigantic industry. that arguably could be bigger than a lot of the largest ones that we're incurring now. Because there's no facet of business where data is not right in the center. And technically, there's no facet of life right now because we are so interconnected on our mobile devices and leaving breadcrumbs of everything about us every minute of every day. Even when we're asleep, they know that. So I just think it's one of those things where hopefully smart, responsible people and corporations are good stewards of what they're doing. And at the same time, hopefully there'll be a good mix of regulation and enterprise can come together and do the best that we can do on just making this process more successful for everyone and more safe and and just more transparent.
Good point. And I think with that, we ran out of time, but it was really an insightful and great conversation. So thank you all, and thanks all. I don't know if you have any questions. Does anyone have any questions? Quick, probably one or two questions.
Hello. Okay. Thanks for sharing your opinions and your insights on data. And data is very important to everyone, to our privacy, to our success, and to our everyday life. So now, given that there could be some new opportunities to all three of you to find a group of data scientists for data analytics, data decision, big data optimization. What will you do or what will you plan for that?
So when I was still a student, I kind of created something called Cyber Smack. And it goes as far as me saying that cybersecurity, social media, mobile analytics, and cloud are leveraging tools for a company to be successful. So I do think that what you're saying is analytics, as far as taking the data and being predictive, purposeful, and precise with it is surely going to be a leverage for a company. Surely.
So next person, in your mind, the data analytics, what it is, how could it be, and what should be presented in that analytics so that people can understand, can use it, will like it, use it as a everyday tool to help their decision.
So I think that, again, I'll speak on it from the perspective of business and NCrowd where we are. So, again, having predictive analytics is another phase that we want to do with our company. We're still considered a startup. And one of the initiatives that we're fundraising for currently is that. I think you hit on it perfectly. The predictive part is a gigantic tool in our space as a tech company. In the overall landscape, yes, I believe that predictive analytics and the AI components of it is going to be a gigantic aid and help to the industry. But I believe that, yeah, I know we're running short on time, but that what you put out to the public in terms of the integrity and the transparency of the data that each company uses, because they're all going to have different purposes for what they're doing, I think is the number one thing that needs to be really amplified to the world and to the consumer is the trust, the privacy part of that.
So next question, how do you do data cleaning?
How do you do data cleaning? There are a lot of scientists who just spend their entire career doing data cleaning, building models that can be classified. So it's not a simple answer that we can answer. Again, it depends on what is the purpose for which you are sourcing the data. Right? Data, as you probably know, goes through sourcing, goes through enrichment, goes through prep, right? And between sourcing and enrichment is where you do a lot of things. And when you're talking about data in petabytes, you just need to start using intelligent ways to do cleansing and classification of the data. So the answer goes there, right? Like it's not a factory kind of a model where you just send the data and it comes out and it cleans it. You have to start thinking about the specific use case for the data, and then really funnel the data through that process. I think we, yeah. Thank you.